Hello, everyone, and welcome to our very first episode of Disrupting Grief. I am so happy to have you here today and incredibly honored to have our first guest, Robert Ginsberg. He is the founder of the Forever Family Foundation, author of The Medium Explosion, and also he's recently been featured on the Netflix docuseries Surviving Death. Robert, it is such an honor to have you here today. I am so incredibly happy to have this conversation with you.
My pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. I'm so happy. I wanted to honestly dive right into this topic. I know you know that for decades and for as long as we know, it's been a very stigmatized topic for a lot of people. Grief, death, and loss, everything that encompasses that subject is quite uncomfortable for a lot of people. And it is something that I am trying to change. And I wanted to reach out to you right away, just based on your story and your personal past. I myself have a very close connection with the Forever Family Foundation. I lost my brother back in September. And when I initially started doing some of my Googles and my research, the Forever Family Foundation was the first page that I came across. And I can't tell you how thankful I was to find you guys. I immediately joined, reached out to as many people as I could, including yourself. And I have to say, though, at the beginning, I was a skeptic, like a lot of people. I didn't know what to turn to. And to be honest with you, when we lose people, we will we go to a lot of different spaces. We will go to therapists. There's stigmas there because if we think about therapy, sometimes we think about somebody having to be on medication. If we go to religion, we already have this stigma that we have to stick to one religion. And then we go to looking at the spiritual world and psychic mediums, and we have this vision in our head that it's all these globes and tarot cards and this sort of um, like psychedelic, stigma that surrounds that entire topic. So I'm really curious. I definitely want to dive into the Netflix docuseries with you. But first and foremost, I really would love to hear from you about the Forever Family Foundation and how this all came about.
Well, you just about covered everything right there. You raised a lot of interesting points. I mean, the first is that we do live in fear, most of us, of death, because to us, we are our bodies, and our bodies physically die, and then we're extinguished forever. And the thought of being extinguished forever is tremendously frightening for a great many people. Um, my story is not uncommon. I mean, it was personal tragedy that spurred me to think about these things. I was leading a very materialistic life, and after my daughter passed, um, I needed to know if there were any credible scientists and medical doctors that have any real evidence that we could survive our physical death. So I needed the science route. There were many people, such as my wife at the time, who didn't need the scientific validation. I mean, she had this inner spiritual knowledge. So I took the course of action. I traveled around the country. I met with medical doctors and scientists that studied consciousness. I learned, I read voraciously. I mean, I absorbed everything I possibly could. And I was amazed at the just sheer amount of evidence that we're more than our physical bodies. I mean, you might say, in the field, we term it survival of consciousness. So what survives? I mean, surely it's not our bodies, so it's our essence, it's our soul, it's our consciousness, it's our mind, whatever you choose to call it, that goes beyond, physical death. And the evidence comes from a whole range of things, some of which are featured in the documentary that you mentioned, Netflix, near-death experiences and deathbed visions and reincarnation and things like dream visitations and after-death communications and electronic voice phenomena and a whole host of things,
Absolutely.
that you can dismiss. And mediumship, you could dismiss all of these things individually, but when you step back and you look at the abundance of evidence as a whole, it's almost impossible to dismiss it.
Yeah, and it's almost when you dive into this topic, at times it can be overwhelming because for myself, for instance, I thought initially, it was just solely for me about connecting to my loved one. And that's all I really craved and wanted to be able to do. But after furthering, like, educating myself and reading everything I could on your website and about your foundation and watching the docu series, there I realized how quickly there's so much more to life after death. And there is something much bigger, personally, I believe, than our time here in these shells that we live in here on Earth. But you brought up a really great point. I I One of my favorite parts about that docu series was actually the neurobehavior aspect, and people like Bruce Grayson and Jim Tucker. Hearing those two individuals speak quite literally blew my mind, just because they are two talented individuals who are passionate about this topic and devote their lives to studying just this. So I I appreciated the documentary. It happened at a perfect time for me. It came along, um, and just switching gears a little bit, quickly. What would love to know, with the Forever Family Foundation, how did you get into the certified mediums, and what does that look like for those who are certified, and how do you go about that process?
Well, we recognized a need early on, to have a reliable resource that the bereaved could fall back upon when they're searching out a medium. You mentioned my book, The Medium Explosion. I wrote that book as a direct result of my experience over the years. We started a certification program 18 years ago, where we evaluate the evidence that mediums can produce under controlled conditions. And I kind of go out on a limb a little bit by stating, in my opinion, 85 to 90% of the mediums that are practicing today can't really do what they claim. I'm not saying that they're fraudulent. Certainly a
Sure.
very small percentage are fraudulent. Most of them are inexperienced. They have intuitive ability, but so do all of us, to varying degrees. And perhaps they should be just personal communicators and not do it as a profession, charging a lot of money, to people. But we did it. I met with various scientists that studied mediumship, and they helped me put together my own uh, system of scoring, evidence.
Right.
And over the years, we have identified mediums that I would say are in that top, 10%. They absolutely can do what they claim. And not only can they do it, but they can do it on a consistent basis. In other words, they very rarely have a situation where they don't, connect at all. Um, the problem is that over the years, a lot of the mediums that we certified went on to become famous. And when people become famous, their time is limited. So they don't do as many readings. If they do readings at all, their fees go up dramatically, and their waiting lists are very, very long. So we're gearing that program up again because we want to identify more of the mediums that can do what they claim, so that people have an easier time in contacting them and trying to book readings.
Absolutely. I found that myself when I was lucky enough. I reached out to Bobby Allison, and I had an incredible reading with her. It quite literally changed my entire perspective on mediums as a whole, and just what fed me information that nobody else would know. So people, when you really truly are able to connect with somebody with that gift, I think that in and of itself can completely change somebody's view and perspective.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree with that. And a really good mediumship reading, like you described, has the power to help transform grief.
Absolutely.
Because you walk away with a renewed sense of hope and comfort. On the other hand, what I like to stress is that what we find is sometimes you'll go and you'll get a great reading, and you leave and with as I mentioned, with a renewed sense of comfort and hope. But then, you go back to your job and you start talking to your friends and they tell you this stuff is not real, and you start to question yourself. So that's why I encourage people to develop a broad knowledge of all of the evidence. So you have a foundation to fall back on. Okay, so
Absolutely.
maybe the mediumship, maybe this, even though it wasn't, maybe it was, she was just guessing and it was a coincidence, and or she was reading my mind, or she looked me up on Google. Yeah, but what about all the other stuff that you've learned? So everybody should try to heed their own intuitive experiences, pay attention to them, learn
Absolutely.
as much as you can. There's a certain degree of well, I would say, grief work that you can do just by the very fact of learning about the evidence. That could be helpful in itself. Not everybody is fortunate to have like a full-blown personal experience, like a near-death experience or a dream
Absolutely.
visitation or something, a mystical, occurrence. But just knowing that other people have them and that they exist is helpful to a certain degree.
And I completely agree with you on that. My husband, who is a doctor, he's very science based. And he actually, I lost my brother in September. He lost his brother in November. And when the docuseries came out, I was trying to uh, basically inform him of all the information that I was taking in, and he was very skeptical. But he thoroughly, from his perspective, he really fed on the science-based information. And I think there are so many different areas that we can take from and learn from, not just the spiritual side, not just the science. There's countless areas that, and so much research that will continuously and is continuously being done. And I think there's niches and little there's pockets that people are able to connect with, and I think it's important to educate ourselves on those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to give the impression that it knowing about this or having a great reading, is going to cure your grief. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
ridiculous. I mean,
Absolutely.
obviously you have a hole in your heart and that's going to stay with you. But the
That's
difference
right.
is, and I'm just reliving this again. I mean, my daughter passed in 2002.
Yeah.
My wife just passed in September. And the difference is, some people think, well, because of all this, I'm surrounded by mediums and all these scientists that you mentioned are on our board, and I,
Right.
I know about all this stuff, that somehow I'm better prepared, and I'm not affected by grief as much, which is not true. However, the difference is that when I fall into the deep chasms of despair, like other bereaved people, I have a means by which I could dig myself out by referring back to all these things and all these things that I've journaled and experienced and that I've learned. So I can, sort of go through the steps in my mind and realize that they're not really gone, and I think that people such as myself have a distinct advantage that way, because we can, I feel bad for the people that refuse to acknowledge it. Some
Right.
people, they become defined by their grief, and
Yes.
the notion, your suggestion that their loved ones still survive in some form, they find that to be hurtful, as
Yes.
if it somehow diminishes the depth of their grief.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's not much you can do, in talking to some people. You could just tell them what you've experienced and learned.
Well, and that's exactly why I am so thankful for your foundation, because it actually gives people the opportunity to explore this avenue, and it really opens up even myself. It completely opened up my view and my take, and in a sense my spirituality as well. And I am beyond thankful for that. There is one topic that I do want to touch on quickly with you, with the foundation, are the retreats that you hold for individuals that do lose their loved ones. I think that is such an incredible opportunity for so many. And I do know that you do have one coming up this summer. And if you want to touch on that, I would absolutely love to hear about that.
Yeah, it's something that we recognize. Actually, my wife came up with the concept, and that we do a lot of large things, at least we have over the years. We'd have major conferences in various cities in the country, and we have the radio show, and we had a magazine and all this stuff. But we found the most important work that we did, even though we limit it to 50 people
Right.
at most, is that these grief retreats, because we get to watch people when they arrive on Friday, and they could barely speak. Their grief is so profound in some cases, and they
Right.
can't smile. I can't even dream of smiling, again. And then we have a closing ceremony like on Sunday night, and there's joking and there's laughter and there's some happiness, and you can't. That's something you can't buy. Just it's wonderful. So I know that was one of the things that my wife firmly believed in. No matter, I mean, she said to me, "I don't care what else continue, but that has to continue." So yeah, the one in because of the exposure on Netflix. I mean, we posted that retreat, and it sold out in 24 hours.
I
So
know. Believe me, as soon as I saw that posted, I clicked my email and it was gone like this, and I was so mad.
yeah,
But
I mean,
yes,
but we have another one planned in January in Florida, in Fort Myers, Florida, and we're
beautiful.
putting the finishing touches on one that we're going to announce soon in California, and that'll be in October. So we want to get more of them in more areas in the country, so people will have access, because we do keep them intimate, because we want people to have the full experience.
And that's so important, and I think that is such an incredible legacy that you are carrying on in your wife's name, only because what what those events do, it truly changes the way people look at grief. I mean, like you said, they come in very guarded, very heavy. They're grieving individuals, they're human beings who have lost somebody that they love, and they they leave with this sense of hope. And it's you're turning the uncomfortable and making it a very comfortable topic. And I think that in today's age, that is such an important thing that we need to continue to do, because the reality is, at some point in our life, we lose somebody that we love, and we're not taught how to deal with that. And so, for you, for the Family Foundation to be doing these retreats, to be providing this information, to be providing a space, I can't thank you enough for that. That is truly powerful.
Well, I
Um,
appreciate that.
Absolutely. And there's one more quick question for you I have, and it's basically, I would love to know a little bit, just touch on your book. I My book was supposed to be here today. It's in Amazon. It's in the mail. It hasn't come yet, but I'm looking forward to reading that. And I would love if you could just tell our viewers a little bit about what you've written.
Well, a lot of people have a lot of questions about mediums. I mean, if you asked me 20 years ago, I would tell you that it's absurd. They're all charlatans and just looking to rip you off. But of course, I'm in a different world now. But I want people have a lot of questions about the process. How do I act? What information do I give them? How do mediums get the information that they get? Why don't they always get names? There's a million questions that we get asked. I address them all in this book. I get into some of the other evidence, for life after death. But predominantly, it's a guidebook for all about, mediumship. I even go into some of the tricks that some of the fraudulent, mediums use. I teach people how they can evaluate and score their own readings, that they get. So it's an easy to read book, but it's a reliable resource for anybody that is thinking about getting a reading, or had a reading, or is questioning whether they should get one, because it gets into a broad perspective about the whole process.
That's truly, truly great. I already know a handful of people that would benefit from reading that book. So, well, I truly appreciate you coming on today, Robert. There's one more thing I want to touch on with you. I feel like we could dive into so many topics here, and I wish we had more time. So I would love to have you back on for part two. I think we could discuss so many different avenues. To the foundation, and to just life and grief, and life after loss as a whole. But where can people find you? What platforms are you on, and where can they connect with you?
Well, the foundation website is foreverfamilyfoundation.org. I also write a blog on beyondthefivesenses.com. The book is called The Medium Explosion. Can get that on Amazon. And on our website at foreverfamilyfoundation.org, you could find all the things that we do and links to the radio show that airs every Thursday, and resources like recommended reading and so forth. Anybody want to write to me that wants to write to me personally, they can at robert@foreverfamilyfoundation.org.
Well, thank you so much, Robert. I appreciate you. And I am truly honored that you were able to come on today as my first guest. We will have this episode up next week, and I cannot wait to share it with the world. Thank you so much.
Okay, pleasure being with you.
Thank you.